So yeah, thank you very much, Laura, for coming and speaking to us today about
Fine.
packaging. It's an exciting topic and lots of interesting things that we're looking forward to hearing from you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It can be a bit divisive. And I know it's a really hot topic at the minute, so I'll try and be as clear as I can. Okay, so let's share my screen. Slideshow. From beginning. Okay, there we go. Can everyone? It's not up yet. So, okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, great. So hi everyone. I'm Laura Close. I'm from Tips Packaging Solutions. We specialise in only vegan businesses. I've worked in packaging for over a decade, and my expertise now are in sourcing vegan packaging with a focus on sustainable solutions. So today I'll be talking to you primarily about vegan packaging, but as many of you are environmentally motivated, I'll be including the topic of sustainable packaging. So we'll start with the obvious, vegan friendly packaging. Okay, so to source vegan packaging, you can either lean on your supplier, but then you are looking at bias towards their own ranges, and also you're limiting your choices. So what I do as a consultant or agencies myself is we weed out the greenwashing and focus on what is vegan. So if you're sourcing, however, for yourselves, then you need to be aware that most suppliers only guarantee vegan and cruelty-free supply materials from their direct suppliers, meaning that the vast majority, whilst providing certifications for vegan and cruelty-free materials, often include caveats whereby further down the supply chain, they don't have the knowledge or the control to ensure that they are 100% vegan or cruelty-free. So basically, they mainly only audit their first tier suppliers rather than vetting their suppliers, because the supply chains in this modern economy are so vast. But formal certification from the Vegan Society does allow for those kind of those claims. So you can claim your brand's vegan friendly because it has got the certification, but we can't ensure that 100% all the way down the chain there's not some sneaky little vegan products. Okay, so just to give you an idea of where your non-vegan materials creep in. So you've got adhesives, so cassin or bone char. Commonly, you've got inks, glycerin, beetles, shellac, and be aware of refining agents. So refining agents may not necessarily be on your material data sheet if you've got a list of materials, because they're used to refine the products. Some industries are better than others, some suppliers are better than others. But if you are going out to China for supply and places like that, you have to be careful that you've got all the information if that's what your concern is. It's in slip agents, in plastic, steric acid, and tallow and cassin. You've got cold end coating for glass. So when glass is produced, obviously that's all tends to be all vegan, but they add a coating to that to stop scratching on the surface. Steric acid can be vegetable based, but it can also be animal based, and it's taken from the fats. You've also got animal based oleic acid vapor. If you're surface decorating packaging, such as wine bottles, using acrylic and metallic paint, be aware of things like shellac. And then you've got typically vegan friendly materials, so acrylic adhesive inks, soy and vegetable based inks, seaweed, mushroom plastics, plant-based plastics, they're great. And then you've got cold end coating on glass like oleic acid vapor, which has been derived from the vegetable fats. And then you've got polyethylene spray as well, which is a plastic. So tips to controlling vegan supply chain. So ask for material data sheets from the beginning, and also check of changes to supply chains. When you're notified of change of materials, check what that material is. And ask for refining agents, if possible, to be included on or accompany your material data sheet, if it's not already. And make sure with suppliers that your brand is vegan. So if they're aware that vegan is important to you, then they're more likely to update you. It's particularly if you've gone in with green rather than vegan. If vegan, and it's really important if you're from a viewpoint that animal welfare is important, make sure that that's really clear to them, as opposed to being green, because vegan and green are not always deemed the same, particularly if you're using up things from an animal byproduct, animal industry, that could be seen as sustainable because it's from an existing supply chain. But the one thing you can really do to control a vegan supply chain is keep it simple. Okay, so that's where we are with I've tried to be, that bit is quite heavy in terms of materials and things like that, but that's just a rundown of that. So just give me 1 second. Okay, so you've got return to store schemes. So this is greenwashing. These are things with greenwashing that I feel that as a company you need to be aware of. So return to store schemes. These are great if there's no other option. So it's ideal with food packaging that isn't yet processed in the mainstream recycling. So we're looking at fake meats, refrigerated products, items that need a gas and moisture barrier. So they need multiple layers. So somebody mentioned earlier when we were doing the chat that she didn't understand why you got a peel off at the top and then the base packaging was fully recyclable. A lot of the time, the base product doesn't display the product very well. So your tray is designed not for aesthetical purposes. So they can make that out of a material that isn't is opaque rather than clear. The bit on the top needs to maintain its moisture, glass, and clarity purposes. So it's made up of different layers. As soon as you bring in different layers and laminate a product, it's a nightmare. It has to go to, most things can be recycled, but the problem is our local councils. It's a problem with it complicates it, so they don't. Simply enough, they don't do it. So anyway, the point, return to store schemes some are more successful than others, but convenience is key. I personally don't like return to store schemes unless they're essential. I much prefer customers and businesses to invest in something that is compostable, because I myself believe and understand that there are a lot of consumers that don't go to the trouble of taking them to store. Some of them don't even know they can take it to store. Crisp packets are now being recycled in store, but I know a lot of people that are still putting them in the black bin. So it's still this, it's important to just to note that if you a return to store scheme is not a greenwash solution. It's not a solution. It can be, but it's not always. And note as well, industrial compostable materials rely on chemicals for the composting process. So again, you're introducing potentially harmful chemicals that you might not want to be included. So I would encourage my customers to design a product that can be recycled in your blue bin, or that is household compostable and thus plant-based where it can be. There is usually no need for single-use plastics to not be recycled in the non-food sector. So for me, unless it's to do with food, I shouldn't be seeing anything in landfill. That's my feeling. So if you're working with plastics, avoid black plastics. Black plastics aren't processed in the mainstream recycling stream. So simply put, they're rejected. It's to do with the sorting process. It's to do with the way the system reads the polymers in the plastic. So black plastics tend to be return to store schemes. So again, they have their pitfalls. A brand can make a real effort simply by recrafting their brand away from black. Luxury brands like it because it's stylish and sleek, but as well because black is a nightmare, because when it gets recycled, it taints the, when it does end up in the recycling stream, it taints the feed. Okay, avoid glued or fused materials, multi-material components. So in this instance, I've highlighted a bamboo diffuser cap. Now, the bamboo seems really in vogue. It seems really environmentally friendly. Bamboo's growing fast, etc. It's a great product. It is coming from Asia a lot of the time, but it's compostable. We'll put that to one side. However, a lot of the time you're taking off these bamboo caps and actually they've got plastic glued on the inside. Because they've got plastic glued in the inside, that's a multi-material component. They're ending up in landfill. So would it have been better to use a fully plastic cap, which wouldn't have ended up in landfill, left on the bottle, would have ended up in a recycling chain and would have been used? Okay, again, just here we've got a plastic pump. Again, that's another example of a pump. So of plastic being used with metal components inside. And again, this is a point where overcomplicated functions are not necessary. A flip top that can be left on the bottle in one material. So sometimes keeping it simple. Do you need it? Okay. So for plastics, somebody touched on it earlier. So for plastics, I only work now with monomaterials such as PPs, PETs, and PEs. So they're basically all one type of material that can be recycled in the mainstream recycling stream. So acrylics, things like that, then polystyrene, they're not recycled. So I only work with materials that can be fully recycled, and PCR. PCR is post-consumer recycled, so it's been made from the recycling chain already. And somebody touched on it earlier, they bought something with 30% PCR. There's nothing stopping consumers using 100% PCR and a PCR lid. There's nothing wrong with that. The reason the consumer hasn't probably gone with 100% PCR is because it's expensive. We do have problems sourcing PCR as well at the moment in the recycling chain. And again, for your plastics, keep it light. The lighter it is, the simpler it is to be recycled, and it'll get through that cycling chain. And household compostables instead of landfill. So compostables are great, but again, somebody touched on it earlier. The problem with compostables is they tend to react to water. So they're good for dried produce, because as soon as they come into anything with any moisture, that starts the composting process. So what is a good idea, and I like to see more businesses doing it, is using compostable on the outside, foil bags on the inside, so that both, yes, you've got two layers, but because they're not laminated together, you can take off the compostable and you can use the foil, and you can get rid of the foil in the recycling chain as well. So it's that kind of thing. And finally, reusable or adaptable packaging. So I hear a lot that this doesn't work. And similar to return to source schemes, there are issues with this. However, in the absence of recyclable options, this idea should be encouraged. And also, there are businesses out there that will repurpose existing packaging, that will take jars and, candle jars made out of old wine bottles. So it is possible to reuse old packaging. But reuse doesn't have to be confined to reusing it for its base purpose. So again, like with the candle jars. We want to reduce waste, so repurposing is ideal. Actively encourage your customer to reuse the packaging, even if it isn't recyclable. So I work with a brand that ensures that 80% of their packaging has a secondary consumer use. So they have, instead of cardboard boxes for their candle jars, they use flax bags. Now, the flax bags, of course, they're from the flax plant. They're fantastic. I'll go on to them later when I talk about materials, but they can be used and they find another purpose for them. So they encourage they send a little bit of potpourri with the flax bags. And when it's received by the customer, when they're finished with the bags, they suggest putting some potpourri in the bags and put them in your drawer. So they're reused for something else. And then at Christmas, they come up with these ideas of, I don't know, making earrings and putting earrings in them and giving them as gifts. So they're really encouraging their customers to find a second purpose for their out of packaging. And just, this is another note I just put on there as well. Who remembers the Nutella jars from years and years ago? They used to come in tumblers. They used to come in little glasses, so that when you'd finished taking off the plastic lid and eating your Nutella, you could wash up that glass and put it on your shelves, and they made perfectly good drinking glasses. So trying to come up with a design where your packaging has a new life for the consumer after use. Okay, so tips to getting it right first time. So design with sustainability and vegan in mind means knowing your materials. So I'm going to put to one side expense and transit costs. I know that's expense is a big thing for a lot of consumers. And as the poll showed at the beginning, sometimes people don't want to be paying extra for sustainable packaging. So we'll put it to one side and focus on material properties, because these are the things that I address when I have a specific brief. So in general, you have glass, which recycles easily, but it uses a great deal of energy. It always uses some recycled glass or cullet in the production, but it will always use raw materials. So you are always using raw materials, as opposed to plastics, which at the minute can be 100% PCR. I'll talk about that in a minute, but we'll focus on glass. And of course, be aware of that cold end coating when it's non-vegan. But ordinarily, glass itself is vegan. It's just that cold end coating. Cardboard is great, but it lacks the properties of glass. So, for instance, we recycle it, but it lacks the container properties. So you've got things like Tetra Pak, which basically add a plastic coating to that cardboard, and a lot of that isn't recycled. However, Tetra Pak can be recycled just because of its dominance in the market. And also remember that those greasy takeaway boxes that you use, greasy cardboard, isn't recycled. So as a business, if you're using cardboard and it's not recyclable because of what you've done to that cardboard, would you have been better using something that could have been fully recycled or something that could have been reused? So they're all the questions that as a business, every time I get a new customer, we have to go through and we have to figure out what is the best solution for that customer. So cardboard isn't a bad product at all, but you have to think through your packaging life cycle and potentially lengthening it. And always remember, when you use any cardboard supplier, to make sure that they are part of the FSC supply chain. That's important. Plant-based plastics are becoming an option. So we've got mushrooms now that are replacing polystyrene, mushroom-based compostable polystyrene alternative. And again, plant-based are quite good for vegan because, as the name suggests, they are very much geared towards the sustainable / vegan market. And because they're aiming towards plant-based, they're not going to sneak in those nasty animal byproducts. However, as I mentioned earlier, they don't tend to work with wet products because that starts the compostable process. So again, they'll need something with it. So if you do need multi-barriers, you can do it. You just can't laminate them together. You just need to do a 2-layer process. Aluminium is recyclable. It's infinitely recyclable. It's quick. And it's can be used in cans or tubes. Bottle caps though are often littered, so they need to be, but they can be recycled. Right, so I'm just trying to whiz through it because I'm conscious that we haven't got much time. Now, I tend to stay away from pouches. Now, that's a bit of it tends to get a little bit of there's a bit of disagreement in this area. Some people think it's more sustainable because you're shrinking the size of the product as opposed to the tins. So you've got pouches and you've got tins, because tins tend to ship unnecessary water, whereas pouches are smaller, less shipping, etc. However, be aware that the pouches 9 times out of 10 are going to end up in your black bin because they're not compostable, they're not recyclable unless they're took to a return to store scheme. And again, the feedback on the numbers in terms of return to store schemes are really low. So if you, once they start working, again, it's a game changer, but at the minute, the response rate is really low. So think about this in your design creation. In terms of plastics, the larger, the better. So if you think about doing a 200 ml bottle of something, rethink it and go for a larger size. okay, you're going to use, that might not be your plan, but it's, if you're talking in terms of sustainability, the bigger the bottle, the better. And keep the mono material, make sure that it's going to be as easy as possible to get through that recycling stream, and ideally PCR. There is PCR is not the answer to everything. Plastic is not the answer to everything, of course not. However, it's necessary in some cases. And at the minute, plastic is not infinitely recyclable. You can recycle PCR, but the more PCR that ends up in the recycling chain, the more we'll understand the effects of recycled plastics in the recycling chain, because you're breaking down polymers and you're reusing it. So we're yet to fully understand the effects of PCR in the recycling chain. Okay, so I only noted a customer that uses the flax bags as an alternative to plastic bags, making them perfect for reuse. So I'm just going to touch on the flax and hemp. Not commonly thought about in terms of packaging materials, but they are great. And obviously hemp is really big now in the market with CBD and things like that. So as a byproduct of that, we're seeing more hemp in the packaging industry. If you do go for flax or linen, these are particularly great for vegans, because especially if you go with unbleached, because as a plant, they don't require fertilizers or pesticides in the growing process, which means because of that, they're vegan and sustainable, because we're not adding any nasty pesticides there or any fertilizers, which often use crushed beetles, etc., etc. For those high-end packaging extras or tags, look out for vegan leathers that aren't polymer based, but instead use cork, mushroom, apple, pineapple. Look out for organic materials, and that way you're minimizing the risk of fertilizers and natural pesticides. Look at lyocell as an alternative to padding material, which is similar to wool. But take your time when thinking about how you want to present your brand identity. If your brand is vegan, then synthetics can be used. There's nothing wrong with plastics if that's what you're looking to do in synthetics. But if you're looking to incorporate environmental ideas, which, as we know, 45, I think it is, % of vegans are vegan for the environment, then you've got to be looking at sustainable. And that can be key to making the difference. Okay, so just quickly, studies have found that vegans more commonly have more liberal leanings. I mean, we're in business platforms, so that might be a bit different, but it therefore follows that they're going to be more skeptical of businesses and brandings. And vegans are some of the most astute consumers, so they're going to see through lazy greenwashing claims. So that brings me to the end. I hope you found it interesting and giving yourself something to think about. And if it doesn't seem relevant to your business, hopefully, even as a consumer, you might be more aware of the products you're buying, and just things that you think are recyclable that aren't, that I've kind of rushed through. Drinking glasses are the same as your candle jars. Neither of those are recyclable. They're a different type of glass, so they don't end up in the recycling chain. So I work with Candle brand, and we don't use candle glass at all. We use pillar candles, and we find alternatives to glass, like the jars and the tins, that we know can end up in the recycling chain.
That's absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Laura. Absolutely brilliant. All I can say is, just so much to think about um, there. And I think we've got a few questions. So I don't know if you want to stop
Sure.
sharing your screen for a moment, and then we can
Yeah.
bring in some questions. Just so interesting to me how you covered the bit about thinking about the whole process and how consumers are actually going to act once they've got your product. What are they going to do with it? Are they actually going to go back to the supermarket with it, or are they just going to put it in the black bin because it's inconvenient for them? Brilliant. So Jay has a question.
Yes.
Thanks, thanks, Laura. It's really really thought provoking. There's so much more depth to this than just what you see. So my question was, so I have a service-based business, and probably a lot of people are thinking the same if they haven't got physical products that they can.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, be mindful as a consumer. Do you offer like a consultation, or do you have like a process or a handout? Because for me, like, all of that information was so helpful, but I know in a week's time, a month's time, I won't remember it all.
Yeah. Sure.
Do you have something where you guide someone through as a consumer and to say, well, this is what you're doing already, this is how you can improve? Because I'd love to do something like that.
We do it for businesses. I've not done it for consumers because I've only been sort of geared towards B2B, but I could do something like that, definitely. It's the same thing we do for businesses. So go through their, even their printer inks, your printer inks aren't vegan 9 times out of 10. So making sure they're printer inks and going through, we can do that. And then when some, like, similarly, if you're starting a vegan cafe, we pull out the non-vegan packaging on the shelves, and furniture, we can do it all on that set. But we can certainly help you.
Okay, thank you.
That would be brilliant. That'd be great. This would be sort of thing to share in the group as well, even if you've got something that's sort of a very simple
presentation.
Just a simple B2B one, and I think that could obviously bring some people your way as well. So do feel free to share that in the group, and if you want to share that with me, we can attach it to the YouTube video as well. Shabari?
Sure.
Thank you, Laura. That was really, really interesting. Because I'm very much into green issues. I actually I'm an independent distributor for a vegan skincare company, and they have a lot of green credentials. One of the things that there's been an issue with not with what they're doing, but with customers' perception. So what they do with their packaging is they use a green bubble wrap, which is decompostable, but the consumer doesn't know that. So I've been asked, actually, when previously when I used to do market stalls, they would see this bubble wrap, and they would ask me, well, is it recyclable? And it's not, because it's compostable, and so it can't go in the recycling bin because it's compostable. But consumers don't realize that that the bubble wrap, that the green bubble wrap is compostable. Do you have a way of maybe trying to make sure that that a consumer knows that that the green bubble wrap is compostable, because they automatically kind of thought that they can they were asking, is it recyclable, and normal bubble wrap isn't recyclable.
No, I mean, it's that's one of the biggest things, educating the consumer. My 2 biggest bugbears is having to, you have to communicate with the customer on your packaging that it's recyclable, compostable. And obviously the other problem with compostable recycling is not everybody has a compost bin. And the other thing is, obviously, councils they're very limited on what they actually take back a lot of the time. But the main thing you can do is be very engaged on social media as a platform with your consumers. The candle brand that I work with, they're very engaged with social media, and in terms of reusing their end of cycle packaging, they do a lot of not YouTube videos, like social media, very sort of like Instagram and what's the other one? Is it Twitter? One of the, I'm not as up to into it, but yeah. So they update, they keep it very live with their consumers and can communicate. And you need to be putting it on the box, really. Yeah.
Sorry, do you mean that you need to be putting it on the box that it's going to be wrapped with bubble wrap? That is. Oh, okay. Because the bubble wrap is separate to the to the packaging of the box of the product itself, though. Is the
bubble wrap going within inside the box around the product, or is it going over the?
It's going over the it's inside the cardboard box, so that it protects any sort of banging during like a delivery. So that's what they do. Yeah.
So on your outside of your packaging, you'll have like you'll see a tray recyclable, lid for black bin. You have to list what your materials are. So I would highlight emphasis on the fact that your bubble wrap is compostable. But at the end of the day, even if it's not even if it's not ending up in the compost bin, the fact that it is compostable means that if it is littered, for example, it's going to be a lot less harmful. So even if the consumer's not doing on their end of the bargain, for instance, we've got seaweed plastics. Now they did trials in seaweed water where they just dumped it in the seaweed in the water rather than in the compost bin where it would go, and it just disintegrated back into the sea and it's into the seawater, and it's not actually causing that much harm. We're in an environment now where babies are actually being born with plastic in their bloodstream. So, and it's getting back in there. At least we know if that compostable material ends up in a woodland area, that it's because it's been dumped and it's drifted, and it's not going to do the harm to the environment that a plastic bottle that's drifted into that area. So obviously communicate to your customer through the box, tell them whatever the packaging that's inside. I mean, it's a good selling point as well. If you're advertising to green consumers, they want to know that their stuff's the buy-in is compostable. So communicate through social media, get your customer engaged, and also I'd also say don't worry too much, because you've done your bit, you have communicated, and worst case scenario, it's going to end up disintegrating somewhere that it shouldn't, but at least it's not causing any harm.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you, Laura. That's brilliant. So one last thing that Cornelia, she's had to leave now, put on there, but was about the possibility of getting vegan businesses to approach producers together so that they're requesting products to be more vegan and sustainable on a larger scale. So I don't know if that's something you thought about, Laura, and something you want to take forward is possibly gathering people together. It's something we could facilitate within the Vegan Business Networking Group.
I think that would be great. I come across a lot of sustainable eco packaging type businesses that want to focus on sustainability, but as soon as but in terms of actual vegan, that there are few and far between. I worked in packaging for a long time, and sustainable was always on the radar, or has been for a long time, but their focus is on what sells, or they believe what sells, and people are a lot more ready to accept sustainability than they are veganism.
Brilliant.
So, but yeah, I'd love to do something like that.
Yeah, so definitely something you can think about taking forward on the group, along with the pamphlet that Jay suggested. That would be great. So just want to say again, massive thank you for coming along today, Laura. It's obviously a hot topic. Everyone very keen to come along and join today. So thank you again. And yeah, so just have a lovely week, everyone.